Good afternoon. Thanks very much to all of you for coming here to this new edition of the European Film Forum. We are very happy as a festival to recover in-person presence. Last year that wasn't possible, but this year, even though we have to still wear masks, we are together. We can relate to each other more closely, and for that, that's very important because a festival continues to be a place for meeting and exchanging experiences. So thanks very much for being here. I'd like to underline this because of the situation we're living in. It's the second year we've had to make certain changes. You know, normally we use the San Telmo Museum, and for the industry this year we're going to do an activity, but we've decided not to use the space we normally use. But we are convinced that next year we'll be able to go back to that normal place. And I hope that these words precede something positive. Quiero dar las gracias a
co-organizer of the European Film Forum. Querría también agradecer a todos los invitados que tenemos esta tarde aquí, que van a participar.
Thank all the participants who will be here this afternoon, especially Elena Neira, who I shall now leave the floor to her, because I have other obligations. I hope that this afternoon is very productive to all of you, and thank you very much. Hello to all, welcome. First of all, before I change language, I want to thank to Media, to San Sebastian Film Festival, European Film Forum, for the confidence they've given us once again, asking me to moderate these two panels, these two very important questions. It's really a luxury to see so many important people at such a terrible hour in a place like San Sebastian. This after lunch hour
session will be held in English. We have a translation service. We will go a little bit slow for the translator to work, so just be patient with us. We have two panels with a little break between them. And hello to all the people that is watching this panel in streaming. You can drop your questions anytime if you have any questions concerning both panels through the Slido app or via the website with the hashtag EFFSS. Also, you can scan the QR and you can drop your questions anytime. So we are delighted to have you here. And before we start, we have a short message from Lucía Recalde, who is joining us in streaming. Lucía is the head of the unit audiovisual industry and the media support program at the European Commission. So thank you all and welcome.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Arratsaldeon. Permitirme primero que me exprese en castellano. Quería dar las gracias al director del Festival Internacional de San Sebastián, a José Luis Rebordinos, por acoger este evento y a todo el equipo por la estupenda de un evento que es mayoritariamente físico, aunque algunos como yo todavía tengamos que participar de manera a distancia en línea. Me hubiera encantado estar con vosotros en San Sebastián, pero no nos ha sido posible viajar.
For the moment.
Into English. Despite some travel limitations, we all start feeling that the pandemic is gradually behind us. But we think that there should be no hide. We are not by no means back to a pre-COVID normal. The pandemic has accelerated trends that were already present in the audiovisual ecosystem before the outbreak. So many people say we are entering into a sort of new normal, but this new normal is the main key element of this new normal is a quick, extremely quick and profound transformation of the audiovisual ecosystem. And the titles of today's forums couldn't be more relevant because actually the green and the digital transitions are the two driving forces that are fueling the transformation of the industry. And we are convinced, at least from the European Commission, that events like the one of today will allow us to work together, to share experiences, to learn from each other on issues that are really critically important for the audiovisual industry. And the two issues that will be discussed today were actually very prominent in the Media and Audiovisual Action Plan adopted by the European Commission in December 2020. And before giving the floor to this wonderful panel and panelists, I would like very briefly to remind you some key aspects of our current EU media and audiovisual policy that has been quite significantly revamped as a result of the pandemic. The first building block, and I wouldn't spend too much time on this, is that we have a fit for purpose regulatory framework. One of the essential objectives of the recent adaptations of the EU regulatory framework was precisely to ensure a level playing field between the traditional players and the VOD services, especially the global platforms, and also to foster an environment, an ecosystem conducive to creativity and fairness. So the recent copyright reform, the AVMS directive, these were two very, very important proposals. However, the deadline for transposition of these two instruments has already expired. And first important message for us is that all member states we have not yet transposed the directive should do it as soon as possible. But there is more on the legislative front, as you know, because there are two very important initiatives in the pipeline, the Digital Single Market Act and the DMA, the DMA that should also contribute to the objectives of reaching a level playing field between established players and the platforms. So these are still under negotiation between the two co-legislators, but we are hoping that the advancements and progress will be made during the Slovenian presidency into these critically important proposals. And the second building block is our enhanced financial support to recover and to transform. And we have a media action plan today. I have just mentioned it. And we have this a robust media action plan that has been made possible thanks to the adoption first of Next Generation Europe, but also a reinforced budget for the period 2021-2027. So few words about Next Generation Europe, this unprecedented package in support of the recovery of the economy after the pandemic. We really welcome that several member states have responded to the Commission's call and included the audiovisual sector as a priority in their national recovery plans. This is, for instance, the case of France, Plan Filière Cinéma, of Italy, Cinecittà, and Spain, with its audiovisual hub. And thanks to this extra injection of funds, Spain will be able also to modernize its audiovisual industry and address the challenge of the digital and green transitions. And there is, of course, Creative Europe, one of the most important funding sources. As you know, the budget of Creative Europe has been significantly increased, over 80% on a EU27 basis. And this is not just a sign of its relevance in supporting the recovery, but also recognition of its past success in instilling collaboration and innovation at European level. So now this renewed media program is open for business, and we have just started the implementation. It's an evolution, we like saying that, although we have introduced some important innovations that are actually quite relevant for today's discussions. Will, for instance, support innovative tools that will be able to experiment with data. We have introduced a number of measures that will incentivize the adaptation of greener practices and standards by the industry. But there will be also the EU funding that will be put, that will support the technological transformation of the audiovisual industry. We are convinced that the data economy that will be discussed today is key. It's absolutely essential. And we mean data analysis for audience development, for instance, for content creation, for the distribution of audiovisual works. This is the reason why in the Media Action Plan, we have proposed the creation of the media data space that will enable collaboration and sharing of, for example, on sharing of audiences, on content data, and metadata. And a number of call for proposals have been launched already regarding tools, for example, on data management for such a media data space under Horizon Europe. And there will be another call next year on the infrastructure for data space to be funded under Digital Europe. Another aspect that is not directly linked to data, but we think it's also very, very important for the transformation of the industry's immersive content, including virtual reality and augmented reality. And while we know that this is not going to be discussed specifically today, we know that San Sebastian Cinemalia is really making significant efforts in this direction through, for example, the Cinemalian technology that will take place this Thursday, also with support from Creative Europe, so stay tuned. And as you know, we will support this year the creation of a VR, AR industry coalition to stimulate collaboration even beyond creative industries and reaching out to other industry sectors. All this is great, I would say, but we know that public money alone will not suffice to address the transformation of the industry. And this is one of the reasons why we have not only proposed, but we are on track to launch an innovative new investment equity platform by the end of the year that is named Media Invest. So the principle of Media Invest is very simple. We would like to use public funds to leverage private equity investment in audiovisual and reduce the risk associated with the investment in film production and distribution. With an estimated budget of 400 million euros over 7 years, Media Invest will incentivize, I have just said, private investment in production and distribution companies that want to scale their activities at European and global level. So this is an initiative that is very dear also to our Commissioner Breton. And again, stay tuned because there will be new developments around the end of this year on this equity support. Let me now dive in very briefly, I'm very mindful of the time, to the sustainability challenge that will be discussed today. You all know Europe has been a front runner in addressing the green transition through the EU Green Deal. And we are convinced that the audiovisual sector has a very important role to play. So we have launched the Green Dialogue with the industry in June. And this dialogue has shown consensus on two main elements. First, that the audiovisual industry needs to walk the talk and embrace change now. There is no time to wait. And the second important element is that collaboration is of the essence to achieve impact in the greening of the industry. So in the first place, at European level, we have decided to dive in and focus on two main topics, the alignment of carbon calculators and also on the development of a EU green label. And these conversations will be taken forward in full collaboration with the industry. This is why your input is particularly important for us today. And I would like to conclude my intervention by quoting Commissioner Breton's recent intervention in Lille, because he said something that is really, I think, essential for what we are doing together today. He said that if we want to be stronger, we need to think Europe, think at continental level, because we are not only a continent. We need to work together, capitalizing on our strengths, so the diversity of our languages, but also we need to take advantage of our internal market. And we think that today's debate is a concrete example of how this Think Europe can be translated in borderless topics such as greening or big data. So I wish you a very, very good event. We will be listening to you very attentively remotely with the team. And I hope I can join you physically next year in San Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucía. Gracias, Lucía, por la intervención. And let me introduce you the first panelist of of the afternoon. They're going to tackle the first topic, which is a very, very interesting one. It's Green Deal challenges or opportunities for the European audiovisual industry. Let me introduce you to Paloma Andrés Urrutia, co-founder of Fiction Changing the World, and Mrs. Greenfield. Please. Luz Molina, head of the European Green Screen Project, Impro Málaga. Sofia Seremeredi, sorry for the misspelling, I apologize. Sustainability Consultant and Development Executive in Hungary. And Álvaro Longoria, Vice President of the European Producers Club, producer and partner of Morena Films. Welcome, and thank you for accepting our invitation to this panel. So the first question, what's the starting point of the European industry in this subject? I know it's a huge topic, but we would love to know your views, and what do you think about it? There's a lot to do, am I right?
Yeah, actually, that's true. There is a lot to do. But it's also true that for Spain, at least, it's not something new. We have been working at least for more or less 5 years. And it's also true that 5 years ago, around 2017, talking about sustainability in the audiovisual industry was more or less like talking about science fiction. But here we are today, so that's a good starting point, actually.
Mm-hmm. You can take off your mask and just speak whenever you feel free. When you're going to speak, sorry.
Okay, so it's my turn.
Yes, your turn.
Okay. Yeah.
And when you're going to drink, if you want to drink, of course you can take off your mask.
Thank you, thank you. Well, yes, as Luz was saying, this is not the beginning of this journey, but it seems like it. And seeing this room full of people listening to this, we've been, Luz and I, and with Álvaro also in Spain, we've been working and talking about this for a long time, kind of doing like activism and trying to convince the sector that this was a very important issue. Seeing this right now makes us feel like this is starting, even though it started a few years ago. And of course, we want everybody to join and start making the transformation, because it's not going to be as difficult as people think it is.
And what do you think is the most urgent message we need to adopt ASAP?
Well, I mean,
Álvaro.
well, I'm here representing also the European Producers Club. 2 years ago, we implemented a Green Charter, which was signed by most of the members of the European Producers Club, which set up the standards of how to make a green shooting. And since then, over 2 years, we have had more than 60 or 70 movies that have tried to apply the Green Charter. Obviously, the pandemic made everything much more complicated. But what I found, and what we found, because we've done this analysis, is that we think as producers that the weight, the focus is being put in the wrong place. I mean, it's great to have producers who are the smallest member of the chain be responsible for applying a green shooting, but it's the wrong way to do it. I mean, we as producers are very happy to do it, and most of us have assumed an extra cost in our productions in order to make the shootings green, but it's not right, because the clients, the platforms, the financiers still have not set green shootings or green films as a standard. I mean, I think that we are, and I've been in many panels also with a few of you over the last 2 years, which I think is when everything started, and I have a feeling that it's all about a lot of discussion, but there's a very simple revolutionary, I like the concept of revolution, solution, which is to make it mandatory. I mean, the only way to implement this is to say, to make a force, to make all the productions that are broadcast in Europe in the next 3 years absolutely, they have to have a green seal. And that's the way in which there is no problem with competition, there is no problem with different countries, there is no problem. Right now, I'm assuming as a producer, the cost of the green, because it costs a lot of money to make a movie green. It's not an easy thing, especially with the pandemic. And it has to come bottom up rather than, up to bottom rather than bottom to up. It's not about me being nice and trying to be cool by making things green because I believe in it. I think it has to be set as an industry standard immediately, because we really don't have time for all this discussion. I think we have to implement it immediately, and that's the only way to do it. And then we'll see how to fine-tune it. But until that happens, it's going to be very hard.
Well, in my experience, we work with a lot of studios, and I agree with a lot of things that you said. Basically, everyone talks a big talk, but they all have their commitment goals, but it's not mandatory to have a green steward on set. So if you put the weight on the production manager's shoulder, who already has a lot of stuff, or a coordinator, someone who's not even been trained, then how do you expect it's going to be done? We need rules, we need policies, we need actual implementation of what we're talking about. I completely agree. We can't just talk about it, we have to do it every single day, because that's what we're doing. You have to go there, and you have to select your waste. And people assume the green premium is a lot, but it's not that much. You just need to compare the COVID budget and the green budget, and COVID budget raises productions by 10% on average. How much is green budget? 0.1%. Isn't that crazy? It's the short-term versus the long-term game. What are we focusing on? Everything is important, but also, can we just sort of educate people, educate on the top and educate on the medium level and educate on the bottom level? So if everyone agrees and everyone knows more about it, then it's not sort of like a science fiction question.
Mm-hmm. Should we include the audience into this debate? Does the consumer need to be aware about sustainability?
The consumer has a responsibility. They have one of the biggest responsibilities, in my opinion. They're the ones who, we're trying to please with everything that we're doing. So if they say they want it made sustainably, then it will be made. You have power. You just have to say it.
In fact, one of the most important responsibilities of the audiovisual sector is that its capacity to reach audiences. Mm-hmm. There's not many sectors around who have the ability to have people sitting there watching their content and even paying for it. It's not only, it's something that really puts people into being conscious about it. So yeah, audiences mm-hmm. should be part of it. Mm-hmm. And it's not only a transformation that this sector needs to do, it's a transformation that all sectors needs to do. So the question is not how do we do it in the audiovisual, is how do we do it in everything, and also in mm-hmm. the audiovisual sector. This is a trend.
Especially if you think about how many other sectors are involved in filmmaking. Filmmaking is not one single sector. We have costume department, we have the art department, construction. They're all different industries integrated in one production that sometimes only lasts for about a month or 3 months or 6 mm-hmm. months. We need to integrate everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe I'm going to play in the other side. I am not extremely agree about what you say. It is kind of complicated. Okay, we have to say hey, everybody have to be agree on something, and I am extremely agree with that, but I don't think that it have to be mandatory, at least not right now. Because the problem when you are to stream making these kind of changes is that people or industry can feel it as something that's reject. So from my from my own experience, we need to make this more progressive. So the point is okay, I am zero sustainable right now, and because out of the blue this is now mandatory, now I have to be 100% sustainable. From me, that's not the way. Lucia actually says something that we have no more time, that we need to make the change now. And I think, and I am also talking from the institutional point of view, that institutions need to provide that mattress where you have to lie on. Because I extremely agree that it doesn't have to be the industry, the one being pushed or holding all the weight that sustainable have. Also, institutions need to provide the the nice tool to be able to make it happen. For that purpose, actually, we are working in green screening as a part of the general project in an initiative that we have been leading from Spain. It's called Eureka, and it's going to be like a tool that it's designed to be used all around Europe, and it's the purpose of the tool is actually measure the impact that the industry has. That is another problem that we have been dealing these years, that sometimes it's very hard to explain in real numbers what is the real impact of the industry in Europe. And that is because it's really complicated to compare the result of the project in the Union, because right now the data that you use for column calculator in each country are different, so you cannot compare the projects. And that is also very problematic, because it's very hard to be able to work in a common way if we don't have common tools. So definitely we need like common methodology about what should be done, but also like technology tools to be able to make an uniform and reliable way to compare projects and to somehow make this competition between producers and between projects. So you can show actually the customer like, hey, my project is green, and it is green because I have a reliable tool that I have been using, and I have an eco consultant that have been like supervising that actually you have been doing things correctly. So it is like a coordination, collaboration, and like we need to create those synergies all around the European Union to be able to do it.
Any thoughts? I had a lot of thoughts, right?
I mean, I have to say, I mean, I agree, I understand, right? I've been working with Greenpeace for many years, and we've done a lot of audiovisual things about climate change and how to fight it. And the big problem is that we don't have time. I mean, this is great. That's how to do it. It would be great. Everybody sits down. We put together. We decide the calculator, the good calculator is this one. And we talk to Lucia, who is fantastic, and decide that it's going to be all gradual. We don't have time. I mean, I've been involved heavily, actively in this type of panels for at least 3 years. And I feel I'm repeating myself. And that is normal. That's how politics work. But the problem in the environmental issue is that we are running out of time. And if it takes every industry the same time and the same discussions to make the change, we're doomed. So I think it's a great opportunity for the audiovisual industry to take the lead and to show how it has to be done. And it has to be done drastically. There's no time to be discussing which is a good calculator. There has to be a calculator, punto. And yeah, I don't care. I'm a producer, I'm making a movie. I don't care if the calculator is this one or that one. Or if no, I need to know how to do it. And that, it's taking a long time, really. It's taking a lot of discussions. And there's and you have been great in taking the lead, and we appreciate,
Alvaro,
but you have to push harder.
But we have to agree that this is not about creating the wheel. Like, the methodologies are already there. We only need to be able to communicate properly. So I'm happy with the idea that we have to know it now, but people have to know how.
But that's the thing, they can all run parallel, everything that you're saying. So it has to happen now, but you also have to have the data. So we need the policies. So if you're using a calculator, but there's no green steward on set because there's no policy or mandate to actually mandate that there has to be a person who actually uses that calculator or knows how to use that calculator, or if there's no education and the producers doesn't know it's important to use it, or the execs don't know that, okay, we've got the commitment goal, but do you know what, we're just going to tick the boxes because we don't care that much about it at the end when everything has been done. Everyone has to be educated from the beginning. So I think all of this can be run in parallel, like hand in hand. We don't have to chase each other's tails.
So we need the metrics, we need the policy, we need to be aware that this is urgent.
And we need
What more?
We need the will and the resources. Like, I've been working as a sustainability consultant for 20 years in different sectors, and I have to say that the audiovisual sector is running a lot. The transformation is being fast. So I see what you're saying, and it's frustrating for us who work in this to see how slowly these things move. But I think it's also the timing, because it's not only the audiovisual sector that's running now towards sustainability. It's becoming a trend. Now it's cool to be sustainable. And it's also something that brings you funds and money and marketing experiences. So it's true that all sectors have to transform, and it's true that we don't have time and that we have to run very much. I agree with how urgent this is, but I also think that the audiovisual sector is walking the talk, or at least that's what I'm seeing. And being a green consultant for many years, and after 3 years funding a company for this, because there was people who actually wanted a consultancy helping them to do this. So it's coming. It's not. We want to run, but it's here.
But look, the proof that it's my theory is that the moment I'm a producer, I make films for a network, for a platform, for someone. No? If they tell me it has to be green, I make it green. That's the way it works. And if you manage to get 5, 7 clients, 10 clients to agree to make all their productions green, immediately you make the industry green. It takes 6 months. Obviously, you have to then implement it, but there's nobody here from any of these platforms, clients, televisions. We're all, bottom up again, And I think it is one of the few industries where if you convince 10 companies to do it, then suddenly you have 99% of the market doing it.
The question, who checks that? Because Netflix has 2022 commitment goal, Disney has 2030 commitment goal, Sony has 2030. They all have it. They all tell you this is what the consumer demands. But who goes on set and checks it? Because at the end, they just get a report, and maybe it hasn't been done.
Well, it has to be implemented.
But we are seeing it. We are talking with the platforms right now, at least in Spain. There's a lot of interest. There's a need to create policies. In fact, I don't know if you're all aware of this, but Netflix created one of the biggest sustainability policies, and it was launched last March. They still have to see how this is going to work in the different countries, but in LA, they are already starting to implement it, and their idea for all platforms is to actually make this mandatory. So, and not only platforms, also public funds will need to comply with sustainability measures. So we're going to see it coming from actually the final client, or the one who pays the party, to put it in an easy way to understand. And I think we're going to see this very, very soon, and that we better run, because it's going to be something that without it, we're not going to be able to sell our productions and to get funding for them.
Just a quick reminder, you can drop your questions with the Slido app. We have a few questions, and we will ask them. You don't need a moderator. You can do it just fine all by yourselves. Anyway, I want to go more specific, and I would like to talk about the development of carbon footprint meters, the digital carbon foot meters. Have you worked with them? What's your experience? Can you just brief us about it?
Luz, this is you.
Luz.
Okay, first of all,
what it is.
It is not just about carbon.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing that we need to clarify. Actually, carbon footprint, it has been the most common one, but the tool that we are working on, it's also going to measure, because it's not only based on carbon, but it's like environmental footprint. We are also talking about water, toxicity of the product that they have been used, and other things that are also important. I would also like to bring this, that when we talk about sustainability, immediately you think about the carbon footprint and like the environmental, and that's important, but we shouldn't not forget also like the social part of the sustainability. It is also fun how if you actually make your project more social, you are also make your project more sustainable from the environmental point of view too. Like a good example of that, it's basically if you are making like a project in some certain place, and in a step up transport catering from somewhere else, you are consuming the product and you are using the business around where you are making your shooting, you are reducing your impact on the environment, and you are also making your project more social and helping that economy, the local economy, and you are like reducing somehow the impact that you have in that place. Also, for example, a good thing that you can do, it's if you need like extras, people working on the movie or the TV show or the project, and you are hiring people around the place that you are shooting, you are actually doing, again, something sustainable from the environmental point of view, but also from the social point of view. Tools. Your question. There is a few of them. Actually, in the green screen, it was very fun, and that's why we tried to start this Eureka project, because at some point we are 8 partners in this project, and we had 4 different calculators inside of the partnership. So we make this task to take one project and use the 4 different calculators. And our surprise was that the result was extremely different one from each other. So that made us conclude that actually we need to develop a common tool, because obviously from one country to other there is some certain data that you need to adapt, but there is some general information and parameters that it has been used all around Europe. So you don't need, if for example you have an international co-production, you don't need to use 4 different tools to be able to calculate how was your impact. With only one, you are able to do it. And that is also going to allow us to compare projects all around Europe, which is also like extremely important to be able to actually analyze what is the real impact on the industry in our continent.
There are right now a few tools that can be used for the industry. One is the one that Luz is leading, the Eureka calculator. There's also Albert from BAFTA in England, and there's also from the PGA, from the Production Guild of America. They have the peer calculator. There are a few methodologies, but as Luz was saying, the carbon footprint calculators are only a very small part, and they only tell you your footprint, but they don't reduce it. Like they are like a thermometer that you put, and they say, okay, you're 37, but how do I do to be 36 on the next movie or the next production? So there is a need for tools, because people need to understand their impacts. In fact, to give an idea, according to Albert, the BAFTA initiative, 1 hour, like producing 1 hour of TV content is 9.2 tons of CO2, which is more or less what 1 European person emits per year.
I'm killing the planet.
Well, that's the reality. Like, there's a lot of trips around 1 hour of television. There's a lot of paper used. There's a lot of consumption. There's a lot of wood that's used for materials construction. There's a lot of impact.
Do you need a special training to understand how these tools work? Do you need is it hard to
We have different opinions. Of course, there are some like easy tools, like friendly use tools, and which should be a very important thing that we need. But of course, I've been working in this for 20 years, and I've seen different results. I always think that a good professional can help you more than a tool, or putting them together, combining them both.
From a practical point of view, because we have 2 productions shooting in Hungary at the moment. One of them is an American one, where we're using Peach, the one that you mentioned by PGA. The other one is a UK one, Film 4 Searchlight, on which we're using Albert. Both calculators come from a different country. We're shooting in Hungary. With both films, we're shooting abroad as well. Jordan, Slovakia, Slovenia. So none of those ones can actually take that into account. So I definitely believe we need a single one that actually can break it down to each territory. So you just put it in. Because each territory is different. How am I going to measure my carbon output with an American calculator. It just doesn't make much sense. But it's still, it's still good that we're at least measuring something, because previously in Hungary there hasn't been any measurements before. So now that we measured anything at all, we can go to the National Film Board, who now started actually implementing green measurements. So we always need more data. That's all I just.
No, I just want to point out that no sector has managed to create their own calculator. Like, we are asking the audiovisual sector to do something that the engineering sector or the electricity sector has been trying to do for many, many years and still haven't managed. So it's good, and of course it's a desire to have like the only sector, the only tool, or the only certification, or the only seal. But this hasn't happened anywhere, like paper or wood, that are the industry that has the certifications from the very beginning, like the ones who started the certification. They still have like, I don't know, 15 different seals and certifications that tell you that this paper is sustainable. So I think it's a good idea, but I think that focusing the debate on let's create the only tool, let's put them all together for the audiovisual is so much pressure. No sector has been able to do that.
I feel we need to take it a step further, actually, and examine the entire supply chain, because it's great we've got the calculator and we can put in the data, but how about my catering company? Where do they get their boxes from? If I'm using industrial composting and it's written on the box it's 100% compostable, but it's a lie, who's going to check that? I mean, I need someone to actually examine everything. In the construction department, I need someone to check if it's FSC approved. In the costume department, I need someone to check it's, I don't know, sustainable. Sorry, like every single item needs to be checked.
I mean, from a practical point of view, as an on-the-ground producer, I find it, we are, at Morena Films, we've been green eco productions for the last 5 movies, I think, or 6 movies, I think, already. And yes, it's great. We have managed even to calculate in the 2 movies that we did this summer our green, our carbon signature, or carbon footprint, sorry. And now we have a problem. We don't know how to fix it. I mean, okay, they told us, yeah, you have to, they told us around 3,000, you have to plant 3,000 trees for 30 years, more or less, no? To summarize what the conclusion that I, as a producer, get, no, from my technicians. So I say, okay, we got it. Your 2 films, 6,000 trees for 30 years. And I say, oh, wow, that's fantastic. How do I do that? And says, we don't know. So nobody really knows yet how to implement, how to clean it, and how to do it. And I think that obviously will come, but just to make you aware of how the practicalities are hard. In the EPC, which we did a survey of all the producers that have implemented, essentially the 4 hurdles, except for COVID, right? Which is a huge hurdle that it's obvious, right? But the 4 hurdles are, okay, costs. Who's paying for this? You know, I'm paying for this, but my competition is not. So therefore, I'm suffering from that. The green consultant, okay, it's great to say we're going to have a green consultant, but there are not that many. We don't know how to get them. They cost money. They're a nuisance in the set. It's a pain, no, to have somebody going around. And it's very, I don't know, I mean, if you go to a set, everybody has something to do, right? So it's very hard to have someone just there, me, like that. No? It doesn't really, it's not practical. That's you, yeah, it's not really practical. I'm sure you've gone through that. Then the third problem the producers had was how to measure the CO2, which calculator to use, how to use the calculator, because there are many calculators, but then, I mean, you go to a set and say, okay, let's use the calculator, and the head of production or the production manager says, what are you talking about? I mean, calculator? I mean, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then the fourth, which is also a big problem, which is a huge for the footprint, is transportation. I mean, one of the things that pollutes the most is transportation, but the habits of actors, especially, and a lot of crew members are very hard to change. Everybody's used to taking their car, they go to the set, the actors, they travel first class or private, and you tell the agent, you know what, we're green shooting, you have to fly coach or go by train, and say, hey, you must be joking, you know? And it doesn't really work. So those are but the truth and the positive thing is people are doing it already. I mean, we are all, I think most of European producers are already aware of this, and the new regulation, which I'm sure you will mention, for example, in Spain, is going to make it drastically more quick.
So why audiovisual industry is so lucky, because actually it's like a really special industry. You said like there is so many other industry with several tools. Why in audiovisual industry have to have just one? It's because audiovisual industry, I think there is not any other industry as audiovisual as, because there is some certain process that you repeat it, but every project that you have to start from scratch and then making the whole thing happen, and then when the project is over, there isn't anything left but the result. The nice thing of the audiovisual industry, and you mentioned before, is actually the power that it have to send message. So what I was kind of encouraged is that the audiovisual industry was creating those so wonderful message to the society, but what was happening behind the scene, it's like have no sense at all that you are creating this wonderful audiovisual project, but when you are on the way of create that, you are not doing on the right way. Transportation and energy are actually the two things that are making the worst for the environment in the audiovisual industry. And the thing about the tools, and you asked before, like, are they user-friendly? Where we have been trying to do, like, I have been working on this topic like for 5 years, and actually it's kind of fun because my company is not good in audiovisual and it's not either good in sustainability, but we are good in something, and it's like putting the right people together. And this is exactly what we have been doing. We discovered that actually you need reliable tools. And to be able to make this reliable tool, you need expert on sustainability. But the problem is that they speak a language that audiovisual industry doesn't. So we actually have been working on translator between these two worlds. And that's why our tool, one of our main goals on it is that it's user-friendly and easy for the industry to understand, even though they don't know what is behind. But we have been able to take the scientific point of view and putting on the audiovisual industry and deliver something that is useful for everybody, and especially for sure to take care of the planet, which is the...
So just a last question before going to the questions from you, from the public. Do you think creators should adopt a green mindset when creating, or is it even possible? I know it's a tricky question.
No, it's not.
It's a mean one, I know. I'm sorry.
It's a perfect question. In fact, when I started into this audiovisual world was out of my activism frustration, because after working for 15 years in climate change and in sustainable development, I was so frustrated, nothing was happening. The change was not happening. So my best friend is a scriptwriter, and we said, okay, let's write something about this. Let's give information through movies. Let's use fiction. Let's use this content. And we managed to create something that helps creators to actually include real information about sustainability. We do believe that this is a very, very important side, and that the industry can help change behaviors by showing different behaviors. And in sustainability, everything is about going into the first stage. So you cannot pretend to recycle everything. You have to start thinking about eco-design when designing the product. You have to start from the very beginning. So yeah, writers know how much it costs, what they write. They can also know what the impact of what they write is, and also make sure that the behaviors that are shown increase the sustainable behaviors in the audiences. So yes, I totally agree.
Thank you. That's a great question. That's what we're going to say.
It's a great question that I love, and that I think we're going to see this in the future.
I agree as well. I work with writers every day when I'm not developing a company with Julia. So I'm a development exec at a production company in the UK. We've got features on our slate, TV series and everything. And on a daily basis, we work with writers. So I definitely believe they have literally the responsibility and and the tools. They have everything in their hand they can use. So when I'm doing a preliminary budget with them, so, well, not with them, after they've handed in their draft, also at the production company, I have the responsibility as well, because I'm looking at the lines and I can go back and sort of work with them. So why do we need different sets? Can we combine? Can we sort of, without taking away your creativity, can we introduce a sustainable mindset to the story? I don't know how many of you have seen the sex education recent season that just came out. In the first episode, literally one of the characters is talking about asking the question from the new headmistress, like, are we going to introduce a sustainable committee at school? And it's not, it doesn't feel forced. It's part of the environment. It's part of the students' everyday life. So it's a very integrated story, a very harmonic idea in there. Same with Shang-Chi. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a Marvel one. And they're actually using hybrid cars. So they're taking the hybrid car, the camera pans out and it like literally shows that it's plugged in. And on the plane, they're asking them whether you want the vegetarian or the beef version. So that's the, that's the main question for us often. But yeah, and going back to your cost question, I think many times people don't know that you just have to ask for the sustainable option from the supplier. They actually have it and it doesn't cost more. We've gone through this when we were doing a Marvel show, and literally most of the suppliers had the more sustainable option and it was cheaper. People just didn't ask for it. I know it's not every single time, but there were a couple of cases like that for us, and it was very good to find out.
Yes, I asked my head of transportation this summer for his sustainable option. I said, look, 5 years ago, I spent all my money to buy 5 trucks, and they are diesel, and that's what I have, I'm not going to I cannot change it,
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to pay me or help me change my trucks to make them hybrid? No one, so why should I do it? I mean, I cannot afford it. So I think it's all about who pays for the change, right? Who pays the party? And also in terms of content, I think, yes, it's great what you're saying, but if you really think about it, that's not enough, right? I mean, the fact that in a Marvel movie, the guys ask for a vegetarian option.
None of it is enough. I think we have to attack from every single angle.
Yes. I know, absolutely, yes, and I think it's important. But I think that the normalization of the eco discussion should be mandatory, should be priority from the clients again. I mean, because they're doing that with gender, they're doing that with race, they're doing with other issues. There's no possibility that you say someone abusing, I mean, you know what I mean, no? So I think in environment, it's very easy to do, and I'm sure it's about to happen if it's not happening already, but still it's not there yet.
I think the important thing is that we need to think long term, because shooting a production can be such a short term. We all just like, with the calculator, you only look at production. We're not looking at the whole cycle, the life cycle of a film. It starts from script stage, goes through production, post-production, distribution, sales, and ends up at customers. But we need to see it together. So when, for example, Disney hires out Pinewood for 10 years, they have to think about every project they're gonna shoot there, not just one. They're shooting Indiana Jones, they're shooting Marvel, they're shooting Captain America, they're shooting all of them. So they need to put pressure on the studio and the sound stages that, yes, I'm going to pay for it and you're going to turn it into something else because I'm shooting 10 films here in the next 10 years. So why don't you just change all your lights to LED lights? Why don't you just use green generators? And I think this needs to happen. Like, it's the same thing. In Hungary, Netflix hired out a studio for 5 years. So the question, who pays for it? The studio and the other studio together. So maybe let's just share the cost. Let's think about it together in long term. Sorry, I know I'm in a position to.
I wish we have more time, but we don't. And we want to just give the mic to the people in the audience. Maybe there's some questions. We have some questions in Slido. Any questions here? Yes.
When you imagine the audiovisual, the cinema industry in the future, what do you think? Is it going to be like now, or is it going to be different? I mean, what are the main changes that you envision to the industry? there is something we have to remove, to something. What's the changing vision for the future?
The wish list, es decir, la lista de deseos, ¿no?
My wish list is working together, everyone for a common goal, because we've got one planet. So it's not a chase, it's not a race. We just have to join forces.
Yeah, I would say that my wish would be that this is not an issue anymore. In 5 years' time, we look at this and say, really? There was still discussion about this? It should be absolutely normalized. And I think it's not only about the film industry, it's about everybody. You know, when you send an email, you have to be aware that there's a carbon footprint to that email. When you put Amazon or when you put a platform, there's a carbon to your habits. So I think it's the consumer, no? We discussed this before, who has to push as well.
Once again, for that, to be able to do that, you need to educate people. And from very beginning, like I think it's a matter that need to be brought to schools. And yeah, my wish list is like COVID brings a lot of bad things, but in this particular case also brings like a wonderful example about how quickly you can change the way you do things. So if we did it, because it was, once again, extremely mandatory that to be able to keep shooting, you have to follow this certain instruction about how to make the set safe, we can do the same with green methodologies. And it's something that it can be done, and it can be done now. So again, everything is already there. We only need to be able to share and to change, and you have to be doing fast.
And another quick question asked by Juan. It is well known that companies in some industry do greenwashing. Does it happen? Indeed, Álvaro is smiling or laughing out loud. How to avoid it?
Wow, greenwashing is a huge issue that has not been touched enough. You know, I mean, there's a lot of companies, heavy polluters, who use their publicity to just give the idea that they're green when they're not really green. And I think that's that part of the discovering what is behind the carbon signature footprint of everybody goes all the way. When you say Netflix, they say a protocol is going to be that. Yes, but why don't you also think about how you are powering your servers? Because that is really polluting, not my 20 plastic bottles.
So you need a green steward on set so they can spot all the greenwashing and point it out.
The greenwashing is something that comes with these sustainability issues always. Again, I'm going back to other sectors, and it has happened before until they're busted.
I know, but they mean they're aware that it is important, so they need to make this fake portrait of themselves.
That's the big difference. Like, it means that something is starting to be important for them, and you know that a company actually focuses on sustainability for the right reasons when sustainability measures are not depending on the marketing department, but they actually hire somebody who knows about sustainability. And we've seen many years. I've dealt with many marketing heads of departments in different companies, and now I'm starting to deal with people that are from my same sector. So yes, this is a very big issue, but people who greenwash get busted at the end.
Yeah, I just want to defend the marketing point of view of this, because, yeah, I mean, I don't care the reason why you are doing. That's a message that I sent since the very beginning. If you are doing for a marketing point of view just because you want to sell your product better, great, because you are doing in the end. So it doesn't have to be like, I truly believe that I need to take care of the planet. If you do believe it, wonderful. But if you are just doing because you want to sell better, wonderful too, because you are taking care of the planet for the wrong reason, but with a good result in the end.
Yeah, but hire somebody who knows how to green your company instead of somebody who knows how to show that your company is being greened. That's the difference.
Make it not a pretender, right?
If you are showing, but you are doing,
that's amazing.
That's okay.
Welcome to green marketing when it's true.
Yeah, but that is not the point.
Most corporations have no soul. Their only goal, yes, that's the truth, right? And the only goal of most corporations is to make more money for the shareholders. And unless they will, if they can get away with greenwashing, they will. You know, I think it's important that that this is taken to a next level, and it has to be real and mandatory. And
yeah, but
they
we
will
don't
do
have to forget that there is still an industry, and if it's an industry, it's because it's making to make money. So profits are important. So that's why we need to convince them that making sustainable is not worth it for the economic point of view, and it's going to be better for the sellers. So that's actually a way
I would say,
to convince
you know what?
them.
You don't have an option. You have to be green all the way. And it's not about greenwashing and giving a great image. It's about really implementing it. And that's where you guys have to come in, because it's very easy to say, to paint it as a green film. It's very easy to say, I'm an eco producer, but you have to really do it.
I'm sorry to ruin the party. I'm enjoying so much. Paloma, Luz, Sofia, Alvaro, thank you very, very much for your generosity and your thoughts and your solutions and your proposals and your, I don't know, your sympathy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
We're making a quick break. Thank you. Before the second panel, we're making a quick break, and we are showing a media video. Thank you. Don't leave.
For the last 30 years, round became square. Small became big, and small and big, and smaller and bigger. From a classic fairy tale, we flew into an exciting reality, discovering a world of possibilities. We've learned and we've loved. We still learn and we still love. Together, we have shaped the culture of today, and we keep on building, creating, and growing. Through the tough, the rough, and the many challenges, always supporting, encouraging, enriching each other, so that square can become any shape, and small can become so much smaller when we realize how big it really is. 30 years of support, and we keep going, because you are building the culture of tomorrow. Your stories are meant to be shared.
Hello again. Again, that was fast. We're starting the second panel. We're talking about digitalization and big data, or big data, depends on your on your country. Which way should Europe take? And please welcome Emilio Sánchez Zaballos, Niels Alberg, and Oliver Figan. Emilio, talk to you. So Emilio is the manager of video and online platforms from A3 Media. You will do the panel in Spanish, so it's going to be a little bit of delay with the translation. Niels, co-founder and CEO of Publicum. You will elaborate on Publicum and what does your company do. And Oliver Figan, welcome, co-founder and CEO of Ushero from Ireland. So maybe you would like to introduce what do you do, what does your company do, just to people know what big data in action looks like.
Vale, intentaré ser...
Try to be brief because I will allow people to speak more deeply. I am A3 Media. I am responsible for this platform where I distribute the content for the company for a pay model. You can see it in open, or it can be a pay-per-view without publicity, and we also have production of original content.
I'm the CEO of, feedback. I'm the CEO of Publicum, which is a Copenhagen-based platform. We've been around for 1.5 years, and we work with a combination of big data and thick data, combining anthropology and AI, and we work in the very early script development phase.
Script development.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know this is tricky, so sorry.
It's a bit of fun too. Hi everyone, my name is Ollie Fegan. I'm CEO of Usher U, and we work with producers and distributors as well as national film bodies to help them I suppose, promote their films to audiences, build audiences, and understand how well they're doing from a distribution perspective.
So, we are in a film festival, and when you speak to filmmakers and producers and you talk about big data, they go, big data. So we can elaborate on that. It's a risk, it's an opportunity. How do we use big data wisely and protecting, the creative side of this industry? I think it's the biggest fear of everyone here.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent, but I think also there are a lot of curiosity to it. Before we started our company, we actually did a research project in Denmark together with the Danish Film Institute. And we didn't actually come back with the conclusion that people were uninterested in this, but that they felt that they needed appropriate tools that were maybe not so dominant as what you probably see in America sometimes, but left a little bit more room for creative interpretation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yo creo que
main key is to understand big data as an important element, but is also at the service of what we are doing. I think it's very important at all the levels, at the platform, working. We have to be very clear on our objectives, not to lose our focus in terms of where we want to get. Big data must be something to help. It mustn't be the main element. And of course, how to integrate it. You talk about losing the fear. How to integrate it in different processes, in different teams, how to understand it. It should not be a dogma. What you have to have is see it as kind of support, something that can help you to confirm something you're working on in terms of creativity, but it can also make you think. It can also make you have the support of big data that makes you question certain things in terms of production. I don't want to be more specific about anything. It's a production and creative work. But even so, you have an additional source of information that you can use, and I think that's very important.
I have to say, for me, data isn't this big, scary thing. In our perspective, what data actually means is we have data on nearly 288,000 films. And the data we hold is all the metadata about the films, but also global showtimes for these films and streaming services that they're on. So understanding basically where previous films have played allows you basically to power future decisions. So if you had a horror film that you were showing last year, and now you're deciding which countries you're going to show this horror film, you can very quickly look back and say, okay, which cinemas took it, which streaming services, which countries was it more relevant in? So I think it's trying to make it simple and trying to actually make it practical, I think, is the real challenge for people.
Mm-hmm. And giving the wider picture of of a movie, of a show, whatever, just what the path of this content has been from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, we work with the national film bodies, and an example would be German films. And we have basically catalogued 15,000 German films. And so on a week-by-week basis, they can see how many showtimes have they had last week for their films, in which territories. If they're looking to say, in the horror example, which of their previous horror films are on streaming services, they can basically pull that information very quickly. And I think it's just having the right information so you can make better decisions is really what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. You agree?
Yes, I do agree, but I think we also work in two different stages of the film production. So I work in the very early beginning where there needs to be room for more creativity. And I don't think it's such a good idea in a European perspective to use big data and historical data to evaluate the story. I think we need to find a way to more elevate the intentions and make more rooms for that. I think the danger of using historical data here is, of course, what everybody's talking about, that you're going to repeat things over and over. But I think there's also the chance that you will do the granddad joke mistake somehow. So what was funny and great and relevant 5 years ago and a success might have been falling totally out of relevance today. And so I think it's not only a matter of repeating things, but also actually failing things, even though that the data tell you this is good, this will work, this has worked before, but will it still work like your granddad's old jokes? Maybe they're not still that fresh.
Because habits are changing very fast from the consumers.
I think the society changes so fast that I don't know the quality of the algorithm that tries to predict stuff like that. But what was funny 2 years ago, or relevant, or political correct, and so on, might fall out of relevance just in a few weeks. Or.
Mm-hmm. And can you just give us some lessons from your company's success stories on some specific cases big data was successful in applying to the creative process or distribution process or whatever?
I think that we have worked in different lines, but we worked on in one. At the end, it can be applied to the entire spectrum, getting users, getting subscribers, distribution of content, supplies. To when you know through the analysis of data that you have a user who consumes less of this and more of that, and who is, depending on the platform, he uses certain things. You have to use certain things to capture his attention in terms also of programming, timing. But what we do try to do, and we've done it from since we had this platform where we were applying big data, is the digital aspect. Since we develop original content, what we do is it's true that we many times you can doubt a certain project. You have something in front of you and you value the risk. It's like the different norms. You have data which telling you something, and you say, I am unwilling to do this. You can see a certain tendency, and that is indicating a certain amount of probabilities of certain things. But sometimes they're not necessarily applicable creatively, for example, certain aspects. So many times there are certain data we don't get. What data do we gather? Data that some are remain outside, some that are important to change certain tendencies. So it's a question that sometimes is constantly changing, not only application, but the elements that you use to get those conclusions.
Okay, so back to your questions about an example from my company. So maybe to understand the service, as I said, we combine AI analysis of big amounts of data with anthropology to make it more like a softer version of AI, because I think it's also important to take steps in the order of pace that people can accept in the creative industry. So instead of using previous data from scripts, we don't do that at all. We do not do predictions at all. We only use the AI algorithm to connect the interest of the writer and the director with what people think of a certain theme. Mm-hmm. And then in the next step, we go deeper with mobilized ethnography, which means we can include people from different countries and interview them over the phone. So they participate in a few days where they film themselves, and they generate around 200 videos we then use as our second pool of data, and then we combine that into one. So that's the methodology, just to understand that. And just to give you an example of a case, because it's very important for us to leave the room bigger in terms of creativity when we enter or when we leave a project. We did a project about a character that is a narcissist, and the director was really curious about what people actually connected to narcissists, because he had his own gut feelings, but was that something that also resonated with the audience? So what we do is we then scrape the internet from a large amount of data, primarily coming out of social media, news media, and then we conduct a sentiment analysis of what people actually think and connect to this central theme. And he was actually curious about if there were differences between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden in terms of what people thought a narcissist were. And they were all a bastard in all the countries, but there was a different shape of bastard. So in Denmark, it's a dangerous bastard that you have to be aware of and not get involved with. Whereas in Sweden, it was a very different approach to a bastard. It was more or less a poor bastard, somebody you had to take care of because it was connected to an illness, and we had to, help a poor guy back to our community. And in Norway, it was just a useful bastard somehow, because yes, it's an asshole, but we need assholes to run big organizations and countries and so on. So very different perspective that we could derive out of this data. And it doesn't really provide the director with more than a map of what people emotionally connect to in their stories. We are not trying to dictate, then follow the Norwegian or the Danish or the Swedish direction, but now he knows, he has the map, and then he can either, go in the direction of identification if he wants to do that, or he can go the other way to provoke people, if that's what he likes.
So if I got it correctly, you cluster the audience based on topics and how they feel about that topic in particular.
Yeah.
Kind of?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah,
Sorry.
So our data will generate a map of thousands of words, and the computer helps us identify the more central discussions and that, and then we will have to go in behind all these words and post and so on and read. So it's still a collaboration between a man and a machine.
So if the creators wants to, he can get his story to be more connected with a given audience, right?
So it's to replace a little bit of the gut feelings that you often have in a creative team with inspirational insights into what people actually think from the future audience.
So it's kind of a golden compass for the creator.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you can call
that's
it that.
cool. I got it.
I think a clear example from what we do is our main focus is working with distributors, and I suppose the clear goal that a distributor is trying to do is to get people to watch their films. And so a distributor will do hundreds of marketing campaigns.
How do we do that, please? Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's over the course of a release, there's going to be hundreds of marketing campaigns coming through to the platform. And so the most important thing is to track every marketing campaign individually so that we can actually see what's happening campaign by campaign by campaign. And I mean like one post on Facebook tracked individually. And then what we're trying to do is to measure interest in the film, moving that from interest to intent to action, and action to transaction. And so when we're looking at basically the course of a consumer, how they engage your brand, we need big data to basically say, look, we believe this person's action, watching more than, say, 75% of the trailer, shows a very high intent to buy a ticket. But most purchases don't happen on that first time they come to your site. And so currently with third-party cookie tracking, you can retarget that person and the next day to say, don't forget to buy your tickets. And so what we're trying to do for partners is they don't want to handle that. We provide the platform to do this. And so then they can say, no matter what the actions are, as long as we see an intent, we spend more money trying to turn an intent into a transaction.
So you said you were tracking, for instance, a Facebook ad or an Instagram advertising. What about other data entry points? What do you measure and how do we measure it? I know you can just be very open about how do you measure, what you measure, but what do you measure? What's interesting for your company?
I think that getting back to the strategy that you're talking about, I think depending on the final focus, if we move in terms of subscribers, we could have the complete volume, because at the end, that influences the final decision. It can make somebody subscribe or no. You have all the data, internal and external, of each platform. Those external data can have that to do with lots of things: climate, what months of the year it is. I think our own experience tells us that one of the challenges of many companies is trying to go beyond. When you're gathering data, you have to go beyond. You get data you really can use and help you to make decisions. And also what you really need is depending on certain clear objectives. I'm not going to gather data I have to have a big database if I'm not going to be useful, they're not going to be useful for me. We work in the opposite direction. These are our objectives, A, B, and C. What data do I need? And there are all sorts of data. First of all, we can try to focus on knowing our customers, knowing the people who are already there or who have our contracts with us, then know the market that's out there. I think the great challenge, and one of the first phases for companies, is really bringing together what you need, getting to know your own users, and from there, broaden things.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny. We kind of break data down into prediction. There's a piece around policy, promotion, and audience. And so I think you need to do basically all four nearly at the same time. So if it's a national film body, they need to think about data from a policy perspective. But for a distributor, it's very much, you need to own your audience. So the more you can learn about your audience, the better. And the more you know about your audience, the easier it is to promote films to them because you have a lot more understanding. And I think the whole consumer piece, GDPR is great and policies like this I think are fantastic. But as long as there's a clear expression with the consumer that you're having a value exchange, I don't just want to give you, I don't want your email unless you're going to get value from it. So it's trying to think of a way that actually you can create a value exchange with people in exchange for their data. And that's what every business is doing in every industry. But in the film space, it's much harder because historically, a producer makes the film, a distributor distributes it, and a cinema gets all the data. But the way the world is changing, you can actually have a much better direct-to-consumer approach where you can then obviously learn more.
That was my next question.
Yeah, but go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I think, look, it's really, really exciting. Like we've sort of pushed into the space where through our promotional platforms, partners can actually sell tickets directly to consumers. We integrate with cinema box office systems, but we also actually allow partners to have a player through their promotional platform. So instead of just having this indication that someone has an intent, that's where we're really trying to get to the transaction. And look, Disney are doing this, obviously Amazon, all these companies are doing it. But we believe it's possible for smaller companies now because there are people like us who are trying to actually connect these disparate dots together.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're not really working with distribution, so sorry to repeat that again. But I think you said an interesting point about the ownership of the audience relation, which I think somehow, at least in the area where I come from, has been a little bit homeless if you think about it from a creative point of view, because I think it has been maybe, as you said, something that people just expected to be part of the distributor. But I think also, in my experience, that is also where using data differently can actually create something new, actually making the creative team a little bit more involved in or taking a bigger responsibility in owning a part of the audience relation, which I think is quite important already. So instead of replacing the analysis of the script with a machine, I think it's quite important to make sure that the creative also come into the center and stay in control of what they're trying to research there. Because I think, and again and again, we have seen that the ownership of, the feeling of the ownership of the audience relations is something they have started to take a little bit more serious.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about how you can work in the early stages of development with creators, with script writers, and if we want a very engaged audience, do you need the creator has to be that the creator is going to be too influenced by big data? Is it possible to give them tools and give him understanding of what audience want without interfering in the creative process? Because I think that's the fear in the film industry. How do we use this data in a very kind way for the creator? Because this is a very risky business, So how do we do that?
Well, I don't think it's true that people do not want to have the audience to influence them. I think it's just a matter of what type of data they have in front of them. It's not my experience that people are not interested in this at all. I think it's just it's not a good idea to have previous data from movies in there. That's the risk. But if you have information about people, sorry, I'm a little dry.
Just take some water, please.
A little hot behind this mask. No, my point is just, I think it's not a danger in itself. It's just a matter of what type of data you feed to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yo creo que
I believe that sometimes people are afraid of how things are imposed. Now it's already in there. At creator level, there is a producer, there's a structure which is imposing something. This is the line you have to follow, this is our audience, this is the chain, and there is this direction that is given to you. Sometimes it's very binding, and some of the creators play the game, others don't. And the same for big data. If we don't have these fears in our teams, it would be better, because it's an information source, and one information source for doing their work. It's not the only way to go. It's not the only road to go. So it depends on the structure, and maybe creators can change roads. You can take different roads. It's possible, and this is the fear. People fear that this is a dogma. I don't want to work just for data. And sometimes data are not complete. We want to have data, but we don't want to obey to data. And sometimes this is part of success, to get out of this road, because you anticipate data, because you are breaking trends, because the reality has changed around you and data are not up to date. So we have to break fears. And you have a responsibility when using data, and it's important to take into account the generation structure we're talking about. It depends.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny, to that point, we had a production partner, and the girl in question was developing a horror film which wasn't yet finished, and she thought that this film was going to be, I suppose, loved by people who are politically minded. She said this is a horror film for women that were politically minded. And the first thing I said to her is, look, if you have €100, do 20 different campaigns, which sort of make some assumptions around what you think your audience is. And very quickly, what she did with the 20 campaigns by €5, she did one for like women who were, let's just say 20 to 25, another 25 to 30. And the data very much came back very quickly to actually show that the audience who were politically minded didn't engage with her content. Mm-hmm. So very quickly, in terms of the messaging for her film and how actually she did her final cut, testing some of these assumptions through experiments basically allowed her to see what was working and what didn't. And she ended up making quite a different film by actually starting this process a little bit earlier. So I'm definitely not in Neil's space, but if you put the audience first and use data to basically get audience to watch films, I think it is relevant across all the different verticals, and it can all be tested. I think it's not difficult to test things with €100.
Mm-hmm. I have sorry.
No, I just want to back that. I think we had a similar story with a director who also changed his perspective of the movie and the story quite a lot, because the character there in that story was, in way, an outsider, and that's what he wanted to portray. And then we looked, and he was quite far with his work. And what we then looked at were again what people associated with an outsider. And one thing that came up there was a really strong element of love, which was kind of strange, because an outsider is an isolated person, and love is relational. So that was a little bit strange. There was an element of love in the story, but it was really down prioritized. It was more a crime story and a gender story and so on. But because he saw that, and because he also thought about who would go to see this movie, he had a quite good idea about that, but he was really not aware of that, love was so strong for creating an outsider. And of course it was like love outside of the norm, so if I'm loving someone really a lot who's not loving me back, it creates an attention to me as kind of an outsider. So he got really inspired to that, and he more or less changed actually what he thought the film was about. It wasn't a crime story, it was more of a love story. And that just came out of looking at the data. So I think that just also showed a very open mind in terms of changing things, and also to involve the final audience in a good discussion about who will go and see this movie, if it's a crime movie or if it's a love movie.
I have the impression that a lot of people think that big data is something related to big companies and companies with a lot of money. And From your perspective, how accessible and affordable are big data technologies to small production companies, small distributors, small companies?
I think it is. I think it's definitely accessible. Like the data that we buy is really expensive, and so we need more partners to do this. And we know the way we price our solution is, a major studio pays more because they have more films in their back catalog.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's and then the smaller distributors have less films and they're looking for data in less territories. So if you're a Spanish distributor only interested in Spanish audiences, you don't have to pay for data for 20 countries or 50 countries.
Because it's a win-win for you, because you're getting the data from each client.
Well, no, it's their data. For us, we provide the platform. It's their own walled garden data.
Okay.
But we need to have, because we're in Europe and there's small distributors and producers looking for our services, we kind of have an all-you-can-eat model kind of thing where you can get it at an accessible level. But from our perspective, it's really expensive. We have 30 people developing, the platform, and we spend, tens and hundreds of thousands every month on the data to bring it in. And then we need to have, 100 customers paying us €1,000 each to basically break even.
Mm-hmm.
My experience as a platform, and I go back to the first point, you need to see what you want for what company and for what goal. So it's important for companies of all levels to access big data, but in a proportional way. So you need to know what are your major goals to compile data and then start to work. And I think it's accessible to almost all companies. And it's accessible not only to work with data and compile data. There's another important challenge for companies. And we've seen it internally for any company which wants to integrate big data. It's equipment integration. It's the team structure. Who are these people? Who's the person who obtains the data? But how these data are interpreted? How are they taken to the company structure or to the work of a creator? It's important to have these profiles, have these people in companies, because sometimes people think that big data is just about math and technology, and content people are separated from that. But I believe that companies, and I'm talking about production and audiovisual companies, they need other types of people, different profiles, people with math and people with content, having this combined vision to able to interpret data and to establish links. Sometimes people reject this because these processes are not well integrated. Sometimes it's too mathematical, and this is rejected by the creative people, and creators don't understand how to work in this way. We need to integrate that in companies and businesses, to have areas and departments that are combined and that can take profit.
I fully agree. We don't spend the same amount of money as you do, but then again, we get some other data. So the amount of cost from our company, it's much more related to what you're talking about, to the people working with it, and creating a connection between all the math and all the content and consequences. And I think that's not only a thing that goes for the AV industry. That's something we see when we work across other industries, which we always do in my company. That I think many companies are really obsessed about getting big data and even live data in certain cases, but really few organizations are geared up to really act on it and interpret it. So I fully agree. It's more about, in at least the way that we work at it, it's more about the people who are working with it and translating it.
Kind of on a side point, but to this as well, there's lots of free resources available.
Yes.
I'm not the biggest fan of Facebook, but if you're trying to see what the audience is for your film, you set up a Facebook ads account and say, okay, this is a film which is a horror, and it's for females, and whatever the information is, and you can see what that potential audience is in a country. So do you get what I'm saying? So if you basically just put in a few different parameters, you can start to understand actually, is there an audience for a film which costs you nothing? And these ad exchanges, look, that's how they make money. If Facebook is free, you're the product. And so that's a clear example of a company making money out of your data.
Al final hay una...
Yes, at the end of the day, there's a different way of seeing it. It's very pragmatic, but it represents what is the prehistoric big data experts in company, any businesses, any professional working in this sector for 50 years. In fact, it's a person that resembles a big data machine. This person has an experience with this genre, with this audience, this moment, this way of distributing films. It's the expert. It's the guru who tells you this is not going to work because this city doesn't like this, because this audience doesn't like it. This happens in the audiovisual sector and in any other business. When you see a barman says, my big data, because I have an experience of 40 years in this restaurant, tells me the big data that I cannot sell Japanese food. I don't need big data because I'm the expert. If companies and if big businesses can understand this, that what we do, in fact, is to gain this experience. We are putting numbers to this experience. We give detailed data, it's figures and facts, and everything is live, and everything is evolving. It's alive, and these experts are not recycling themselves because sometimes they lack information. We are more up to date, and we can play with real-time decisions, and we are making a step further. The problem appears when you believe that long-dated experts are real processors, and they're not.
It's kind of finding the unknown for these people working in the company in a certain way, just giving them new tools, and sometimes they think these tools are going to replace their decision-making process, and it's not. It's just giving another tool to make better decisions. Before going to the questions, if there's any question in the public, a last question is something, it's being on the, we've been speaking a lot about the European audiences, and if it's possible to develop a European algorithm. Is a European audience a thing? Is it not? Is it too fragmented? You were talking about how from different countries the interpretation of a starring on a show or on a movie were completely different. Can we think of a European algorithm or not? It's totally impossible to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely, but I think it's also again a question of what is an algorithm and what should it do? Should it help you sell the movie and bring people into the cinemas once it's done, or should it help me by supporting the creatives in coming up with ideas? Some of them are probably more easy, and some of them are more difficult to work with. But I just think it's a matter of making sure that the creatives still have a role in a model. Working with both a combination of maybe hard factors and soft factors that you can change and iterate and have control over and be part of as a creative one, especially when it comes to developing the stories. So I think absolutely there's room for it, because again, it's not my experience that the creative people are not interested in data. It just needs to be the right type of data, and it just needs to provide some inspirational insights.
Any thoughts?
Yo creo que al final es un...
I think that at the end of the day, it's a question of the field we're moving in. If we are working with user groups and data, the more concrete and specific the information to the group you're working with, but there are other data that can be very useful for us. I speak from the point of view from a platform, a national platform, although we distribute globally. At the end of the day, even within Spain, if we have data by region, by clusters of users, it is, or have a global data from Europe or worldwide, certain things can help you. But the more you reduce things to more specific things, perhaps it can be more useful. But there's no doubt that having a global data in terms of Europe with lots of things in common, that can help. We also know, of course, the diversity that exists. Data, no matter how simple data, the life or the customs of the users in different countries of Europe vary greatly. And there are certain frameworks, but we can see as well how the different perceptions of different people in different stories. So there are things which can definitely help you, but in terms of clusters, in terms of countries, in terms of users, specific users of different countries, they're gonna certainly help you to be more.
There's two random stats I was just thinking there, and I don't have the exact figure, but it's pretty much 13% of people buy 50% of the cinema tickets. Where, if you think of that, that's just, it's a really like scary stat. But there's a totally on the opposite side stat from the Motion Picture Association of America that say 92% of people who'll go and see films don't go and see it. And there's something in between the two of those which are very different, but what we need to do is basically capture more data about audiences, and then you'll see the frequency of them likely to buy a ticket. Like, I don't think there's a person who says, I love European film. I don't think there's a person who says, I want to see film from every country. But people who love film, you can capture that data. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just down to basically having smart strategies to have what I go back to that value exchange. And I do think from a European policy perspective, we have two problems probably clashing. One is that we really want privacy, which I think is great. And to have a European version of Facebook advertising or Google advertising network is nearly in conflict. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there is going to be a simple solve for the two, but I think every company should be thinking about how to maximize their own audience, which they can control. Mm-hmm. And if I'm using a cliche, but if you imagine you're a distribution or production company and you're a house, your foundation is your digital platform. Mm-hmm. And you really need to take care of having the right digital platform to build this data, and to have as many different data sources as possible to make sense of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge. We have time for questions. I think there's a question.
Thank you so much for all the information. I really wanted to link both panels, actually. I was curious, as data gatherers, have you been thinking, I know the environmental aspect of film is looking into digital as a possible solution, and very often we say don't print and be digital and all that. And I wonder if it goes vice versa, if digital is taken into account the environmental impact of digital, which is information that we could all use as we're all going into the digital era. And we want to link both, so I'm very interested to know from all of you what your thoughts and what your knowledge is. I know it's very, I've been doing research on this and haven't found it, but I'd be very interested to know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, so I actually just did a calculation on our green, our footprint, what's it called? Our footprint, reduced footprint, sorry, for the last year. So we've been conducting around 20 projects in 3 different countries, and we have been involved with around 500 people in terms of gathering all the data. And we've also, of course, just asked the internet. I don't have any calculation on that part. But in terms of how much we have saved by traveling, because normally as an anthropologist we will go around, so people talk to them in their homes and so on. And I think we've spoken with 500 people just because we digitize a mobile platform, so people film themselves. They never leave their homes, we never leave their office. And we just calculated how much we reduced on that as well, which would be the equivalent of how much 11.5 cars drive a year. We will reduce that by just doing everything on video. And I think we can see more and more of that. And another benefit, I think, from that perspective is that we can also compare different markets. So we always compare a home market to an export market, and that would be just even worse because then we would have to travel to America or whatever to engage the American audiences, but we just do that by video now.
Actually, a slightly random piece is we work with the Film Commission. It's the first Film Commission who's asked us to have the green production badge and the data stored for the films, which I thought was really interesting listening to you guys talk. And I was actually wondering, is there a database of green productions? Because we would love we have 84,000 European films. we could store that against those. And, you know, it's an easy way for us to have influence is to make it simple for our partners to create collections of movies for green productions. And I do think national film bodies, you know, should do this, and we see that film commissions are doing it. And I do think it's really important.
Mm-hmm. Synergies, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's bringing more data together.
Yeah.
It's just trying to bring it all so that it's easier for discovery, which is what we all
And the
want.
bigger, the better, actually.
Yeah.
Any more questions here?
My question maybe is going to be more humble, but congratulations, that was right on spot. It's about, you know that more than 70% of the IPs that are going into production are based on books or other material, non-original. So have you put on the data, the data that you were trying to analyze, all those tastes, different tastes that are coming from different cultural sectors into the pot, the shaky, and getting the results? Because if you see the mainstream trend goes into protect IPs by creating universe of prequels and sequels and more, that basically they have already the data that is going to happen. They can get failures, but they're working on a very copy-paste similar things. It's made no risk. Yesterday, in the presentation of originals, was Netflix, was Amazon, was HBO Max, and Filmin, was great because the final point was everyone wants the people not to lose the subscription. Everyone wants to be different. Everyone wants to get innovation. Everyone controls the data. Everyone wants to give a chance for, let's say, new talent and so on. If female, even better. But at the end, by repeating, what happened is that people, sooner or later, it's better, and Jaume Ripoll in Filmin said it clearly, it's better to be risky without controlling the data because it has more value rather than repeat something that it's in the platforms and nobody's going to see. And at the end, people are tired. But to make the story short, it's you control like an earthquake, like predicting earthquakes, that you can be sure that you are safe, and at the end, the earthquake happens because people change by whatever. I want to be humble, sorry.
Yes, very simple, very humble. What I think is that I agree with what you're saying, and I understand your doubt. But I think that data, what it gives you is another argument. When you talk about IPs that are going to work, that have a definite course, you are doing a product on which you have more information. By a new creator, a product by a new creator has less data, and there's less risk. So, it has more risk. So if we have more data on platforms globally, I think what we all try to do, we would all love to have new product, so disruptive that becomes a new kind of reference. But at the end of the day, you've got to work to have a certain kind of balance. Data also helps you to say, okay, I'm going to have, according to these three products that work very well, and that gives me a certain amount of margin to do new things. But very often, reality takes you in a different direction. Perhaps one or two where you place more risk is the one that ends up being more successful. At the end of the day, we are companies, we are platforms, we have a business model to get subscribers and keep those subscribers. That's a completely different issue. But what we have to do is to balance these data. And the data that can help us not to do the same IPs, but to take certain risk because you have certain amount of security based on your products.
I have three more questions from the people watching online. The first one is how to avoid incurring into stereotypes when profiling the audience according to the gathered data. I know this is kind of a recurring question when you...
As a random example, and just to show how different audiences are, we were working with Universal on ticketing campaigns for 50 Shades and Despicable Me. And it was the same people buying tickets. So it's not like someone just likes
Really?
R-rated movies. Yeah, there was certain people who bought for the two. And so they went with their kids and then with their girlfriends.
To the Despicable Me, right?
Yeah, well, who knows? The world is a crazy place. But you can't always stereotype who an audience is. What you can do is have some assumptions that you might be right, but people's choice for film is very particular. And you know, I might hate all romantic comedies, but I like one because it's set in San Sebastian, and I was there, and I love San Sebastian. And you can, like, why did I like this film? You can't tell from the data alone at San Sebastian. What you can see is kind of broad trends over time, and you can't just rely on data, like one data point that I saw a romantic comedy to say that I like all romantic comedies. So I think if you look at someone like Amazon, they take a really long view. And Amazon see what products you're buying, they see which products that you're not buying, probably more importantly, they see how many times you looked at particular products, how many times does it take you to come back to buy products, do you have a Prime account? So once you start to think of it, you know, with a lot of different sources, over time you get a decent picture, but you'll never be able to say is, you as an individual would love to see this particular film because there's just so many variables there.
Mm-hmm. You agree?
Yo lo simplificaría con...
If I saying that you don't have to be slave to or hostage to data. Data is there to help, but it shouldn't determine absolutely what you're doing, because at the end you can just repeat yourself, and you're going to end up just modifying the data, because you're going to say, oh, you can't do this, but the temptation is there. The temptation is there. The thing is, that is my niche, that works, so why change? But the data is going to tell you that this works. So when you start to see that it's falling and it's not working, you change. Companies, creators, I think all sectors, if you want to be at the top, you have to be one step ahead of things. Not like a crazy person not paying attention to data. So if there's a good tendency, you will continue. But you have to also work on the possibility of innovation and change, because you would see that there's certain things that you can sort of go along with, certain cycles which are there and which are...
I think also to what you said, we are often also very surprised about how little meaning segmentation means. Right now, the most successful youth movie in Denmark is made for guys who are 55 years old, and it's very popular in high school audiences. And I think we see that again and again. And now, given the fact that we work with two different sets of data, one is qualitative, we also always make sure that the people we talk with are quite wide groups. So of course we always integrate people who we somehow expect will see the movie, but we also take a far out group somehow because to test of this, because I think it is very difficult to segment down to something you can expect clearly to happen.
Okay, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, for attending these two panels. I guess the first panel was about the things we need. We need metrics, we need policies, we need to be aware that we need to be more concerned about the environment. The second panel is about what we have, and we have knowledge, we have data, and we can, with both tools, be better at our jobs and be more sustainable in our jobs. So thank you so much to European Film Forum, to Creative Europe Media, to the San Sebastian Film Festival. Yeah, it's been a long afternoon. Thank you so much for your questions, and see you next year, hopefully.